Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 222 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the second minute podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight is my very lovely hostess, Erin Paulette. How are you doing, Erin?
Knowing full well that every law is enforced at the barrel of a gun, I am entirely in favor of a law which states that Christmas decorations will not be put up and Christmas music will not be played until, well, I was gonna say until December, but you know what? I'll actually give it the day after Thanksgiving. I'll allow it on Black Friday.
Black Friday is officially the first day of Christmas season.
And, so I did not have a very good Halloween, and I don't even care to go into explaining why. But I will tell you this. I was watching something on streaming video. Like, it wasn't even Amazon Video. It was one of those things which piggybacks through Amazon. It was Freevee, if that means anything to y'all. And so you access it by Amazon, but you still have to sit through videos. That's how they make them free. And it was... Oh, I posted about it on Facebook, and I actually did a timestamp. I believe I said it was 10:30 at night. Let me double check here. Yes, it was 10:30 at night, Eastern Time, October 31st, was the first Christmas commercial that I have seen. Halloween's corpse wasn't even cold because on the West Coast, it was still 7:30. It was still Halloween hours. And I'm seeing Christmas commercials. And yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of this being enforced at the barrel of a gun and people being shot for this. I don't care if you call me heartless. I'm done. I'm absolutely done with the incursion of Christmas because we have an entire national holiday in front of us, and we shouldn't allow gross commercialization to overshadow the national holiday of Thanksgiving. And, will get off my lawn and fetch me my Geritol.
I mean, I'll go with that. I don't like Christmas music in the Christmas season, but at least I understand it. Christmas music in the midst of fall? No, not okay. All right, maybe if it's July 25th and you're doing the Christmas in July thing, okay, that's cute, especially since, like, the first Christmas in July I ever sat through was when I was volunteering at Maine Medical Center in Portland. And I was helping Santa, who was wearing Bermuda shorts and sunglasses, pass out presents to the kids at the in the children's ward at the hospital. I'm like, okay, I'm into this. These kids are hurting in a bad way. They're not having a good time. Hey, guess what? You guys get a Christmas when it's warm out. And
well, anything involving kids in hospitals is going to get a pass.
Yes.
But that's the holiday version of exigent circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So, like, I'm willing to even give Christmas in July a pass again because the first one I ever celebrated was in a hospital with sick kids that I was helping out. So, yeah, I'm willing to give that a pass. But yeah, outside of July 25th and whatever Black Friday happens to fall on, No, it's not okay. And yeah, I don't get this whole, like, we got to start holidays. I saw the first bags of Halloween candy. I want to say it was September 8th at my grocery store. I'm like, it's not even late September. Yeah, get off my lawn.
But I understand you had fun taking your daughter trick-or-treating.
Yes, we had a lot of fun, and we got a lot of candy. Well, first up, my lovely town of West Morocco has gotten, like, evidently quite gentrified because, good Lord, she got a lot of full-size candies. I'm like, I never got this when I was a kid. And she got pounds of candy because we stayed out fairly late. I guess the Halloween crowd tends to run a little young in my area, and so there's a bunch of little kids from, like, I think we got the first one at like 6. It was fairly early, and then they went until, I mean, according to my wife, I think somewhere around like 8:30 was like one of the last ones. There was a couple more at like 9. And then after that, there was nothing. And so at like 8:45, we're walking home. She says her feet were tired and she wanted to head home. And then we bumped into one of our neighbors. And then it suddenly got to competitive trick-or-treating. And so they would go up to a house and the person would be sitting. There was a beautiful night, so a lot of people were sitting outside with their candy bowls. And people would be like, yeah, I'm getting ready to turn it in. Kids, take as much candy as you want. Literally, take it all. And so they were just grabbing like fistfuls as big as they could, and just like carrying them like world's strongest man competition with the Atlas stones over to the to the candy bag and dumping it in. And so like literally, I think she ended up netting about 8 pounds of candy.
Nice.
Which thankfully she will not be able to eat it all. So I've already stolen some.
You've already introduced her to taxation as theft.
Oh yes, daddy tax. It's not even taxation at this point in time. It is fees for goods and services, which people were laughing at as well because this was her plan all along. Is she gave me a large tote bag, and she had a smaller bag. And so
you were her candy Sherpa?
That's correct. She would fill up the small bag, and then she would come over and dump it into my bag and fill it up. And every single person who was standing on their porch after giving her candy and seeing her dump it into the bag was just deeply amused at the fact that, like, oh yeah, she had such a system going. As it goes back to the candy mule.
She understands logistics at a young age. That's very good.
I mean, yes. And so then we got to bed late. We of course had school the next morning because Halloween was on a Monday, and so Tuesday came, and was she grumpy this morning? And she has been grumpy the entire day, and hopefully she is asleep, but she barked orders at me for it was officially time for me to come read her stories. And I don't think you're going to talk to me that way. So nope, I'm out. And I went downstairs and I mixed myself a drink, which I will note is my first drink of the day. I deserve a gold star because what a day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, bad days all around. We're crabby and we're going to do our best. So I guess transitioning into the news story, somebody had an extremely bad day, and his name was Paul Pelosi.
So before, I mean, I really don't much want to touch this because it reeks of TMZ level scandal and dirty laundry and things like that. The only thing I thought when I heard about this, and this probably makes me a bad person that I don't care, and I wonder if you or our listeners felt the same way, is that the moment I heard the word hammer is when I let go a sigh of relief and went, thank God it wasn't a gun.
I mean, there is that. That was actually not the angle. I also do not have it in there. Of course, anybody that has been paying the least bit of attention has probably heard the multitude of salacious conspiracy theories from, this is Trump's boy, to there being some salacious sexual angle onto this and all of that. It's all unfounded. This is someone who has some severe mental health issues, and there's a lot of foggy details. But the big angle that I wanted to get into is this is Nancy Pelosi's house. She is the Speaker in the House. She is, I believe, third in line for the presidency. I believe if something happened to both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, she would be sworn in as President of the United States.
President, Vice President, Speaker of the House, President Pro Tem of the Senate, and then I believe you start going through the cabinet. Starting with, I want to say the Secretary of State, but I'm fuzzy at that point.
I'll have to rewatch Mars Attacks. That was a good documentary.
Is that the one with the brain aliens and
yes.
Okay.
And Jack Nicholson playing about 15 parts and chewing the scenery in all of them. But yeah, the thing that I got in there is that, now granted, Speaker Pelosi was in DC at the time of this attack, so there may be ramped up security when she is actually in town, but still, the husband of is still a fairly valuable asset, given that, you know, if he had been kidnapped, which is actually one of the charges that the person who did this breaking entry is being charged with, is attempted kidnapping. If he had been kidnapped, this would still have some major leverage on the United States government. And this guy, according to the reports, reading them as we can, broke into the house with nothing but a hammer and essentially, I mean, nearly killed Paul Pelosi. I mean, he got a skull fracture, which for anybody, even especially someone at his advanced age, I believe he's 81.
82.
Yeah, is a...
well, the point being is that the assailant was listed as 42, and they also listed Pelosi as 82, and it's like exactly a 40-year difference. Huh. Mm-hmm. That's why I remember.
Yep. But yes, the whole... I am surprised that he was able to get through. I actually put this story up initially in the fact that I hadn't heard that it was being reported that he hadn't even broken in, that he had actually simply just opened the rear glass door. But that does not appear to be true. At least I'm gonna give there's conspiracy theories along that as well. That there's certainly, if you go to the show notes, there is a TMZ article that actually has helicopter photos of the Pelosi mansion, and you can see that the rear door is broken out. Though there is some discussion of there's glass on the outside. Was it broken from the inside or outside? Doesn't matter. Either way.
So you're saying that someone did smash Pelosi's back door?
I'm going to just leave that. I'm just going to leave that well enough alone, Erin Paulette. But either way, it is just a line of the, have your security set up. Note that your house is only as secure as those adorable breakable little walls are in your windows and glass doors. And yeah, I bet you Paul Pelosi wished he had a gun. Certainly better to be cleaning up weirdo guts off the carpet than being in the hospital with a skull fracture. Mm. And so hopefully at the time of this recording, I have heard nothing to the contrary that says that Paul Pelosi is not expected to make a full recovery. So hopefully that will continue to be true. And I wish the best of him. I just really wanted to point out, really just minus all the salacious talk and conspiracy theories to this, what a mundane attack and how severe this was. And of course, also in San Francisco, the land of super duper gun control.
So Weer'd. Speaking about the land of super duper gun control, I understand that there's a development involving Canada and their most recent handgun ban. The ban that isn't a ban.
Yes. Some recordings have surfaced, and they're incomplete recordings, so there's always a chance that it is not as salacious as it's going through. But according to this, it is a recording of the commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Brenda Lucki, Lucki, and talking about essentially her manipulating the various law enforcement agencies that were investigating the Nova Scotia shooting spree. That was, does it say when that was? Was that 2020 or was that 2019? Either way, there was a massive spree killing that happened in Nova Scotia by a dentist who was, in all accounts, a holster sniffer who was madly in love with being in law enforcement and had uniforms and police vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And he had a bunch of guns that were all of questionable legality. And it sounds like that the local law enforcement weren't particularly interested, or maybe not ready to release the information on the guns until the investigation finalized. But it appears that Ms. Lucki was pressuring them to release the information so she could pass them on to Justin Trudeau and get a chance to push the various gun control legislations that he has since pushed. First the assault weapons ban, and now the handgun freeze.
Trudeau.
Yeah, I butchered it. I'm leaving it at that. I don't have enough respect for him to to say something else. So you know what? He's going to be Trudeau for the rest of the episode.
Fair enough. And since we're seguing, the Nova Scotia shooting was April 2020.
Thank you. And I will add that in the initial reports, allegedly the shooter he had a pistol, and the story they're sticking with was that he shot and killed an officer first and then took their pistol. And that was one of the initial salvos of this. And I think it lasted several days actually, but the word was that the rifles that he had and the magazines that he had were purchased at a gun shop in Maine and were illegally smuggled into the United States. And I will say that I find that to be a very, very fishy detail, given how much attack on gun owners has been going on through the Biden administration and all that, and the ATF. And if in fact there was a gun shop in Maine that was illegally selling guns to shifty dentists in Nova Scotia, you would think we would have heard about that. And the lack of attacks on gun owners and gun shops, the lack of attacking is deafening. And I wonder about the story of how he did get a hold of those guns, especially, I mean, there's another statement is he had a whole lot of police uniforms and police equipment. And so it would not be the first time that something might have fallen off the back of a truck or gotten lost during a training exercise. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Say no more?
Say no more. I picked this story out just because it shows just the targeted nature. Trudeau did not create these bans because he desperately wanted to keep Canadians safe. He always wanted to ban guns, and this was an excuse. And this points further in that direction. That again, gun control is not being done for altruistic reasons. It's being done as part of a larger plan. And
apparently the gun control is more important than actually bringing someone to justice. Because as Runkle, I don't know if he outright stated it or if he alluded to it. I'm not in the best mental state right now. But one of the things he says, they sabotaged an investigation for propaganda. In other words, there were material details about this particular crime that the police wanted to keep quiet because that aids their investigation. Mm-hmm. So that, if someone confesses to doing it and they get the details wrong, it's a false confession, that sort of thing. And Ms. Lucki, among others, was very happy to give all these details away and impede the investigation just in order to score political points.
Yep, that's exactly the point that I wanted to make. When that was exactly my reaction to this is, just how really dead set they are into vilifying gun owners and trying to stamp out the gun culture in Canada. And I don't know what the future is for Canadian gun owners. I mean, there certainly is a lot of them. But unlike us, they do not have a Second Amendment where we can have things like the NYSERPA Supreme Court ruling that says, no, you can't do this. You have to, if you want to put restrictions on guns, you have to show where the people who were putting restrictions on guns happened in the ratification of the Second Amendment, or in the case of gun control at the 14th Amendment, because yes, the only real gun control that existed in the United States was, no, you can't have one if you're a Native American or an African, because you aren't considered people under the U.S. law at the time. And the 14th Amendment said, knock that off. They're people. They deserve to be people, and therefore they can also own guns. And at no point did they say, yes, but you can't own a magazine above a certain level, or you can't own a cannon, as Joe Biden likes to allude to. Either way, my heart goes out to Canadians, because as bad as I complain about how we've got it in Massachusetts, you guys have it so much worse. And then I've got this last little story. It's really more of me just being petty and having I am all for pettiness right now. Spill the tea, sweetheart. Yes. Well, it's a tweet from Costas Maros, and his line is just beautiful. If I was a Giffords donor, I'd be pretty pissed to see my money wasted on Giffords supporting the enactment of new rules that they then sued a couple of months later. And essentially, it is outlining various things, talking about how Giffords was petitioning the ATF to push forward their latest ruling against quote unquote ghost guns, essentially putting heavy restrictions on how you buy or sell 80% firearms. But of course, the ATF doesn't want to go too far because, well, Clarence Thomas is there and he doesn't take kindly to this crap. And so for them to say, hey, this thing that is shaped vaguely like a Glock or vaguely like an AR lower, we have given it our blessing in saying it is not a Glock, it is not an AR lower, so therefore it does not count as a gun. But under new pressure, we have stated that buying a complete kit where you might have the barrel and the slide and all of the small parts and things like that, so that and the jigs and the mills, so that you can cut out all the bits and pieces, and then as soon as you are finished, you can immediately slap on the remaining parts onto that receiver to make a working firearm. That is considered a firearm under ATF law. But if in fact you buy all of those parts, and I forget, I haven't looked into the rules. I don't do 80% builds, so I haven't been following it too closely to figure out what's legal, what's the game of legal chicken you can play. I just know that they have been splitting up the boxes, and so one box may contain either just the lower or just the lower and the jig, and then maybe another box will contain the various drill bits and end mills that are needed, and then there'll need to be a separate thing that would contain, say, the barrel and the slide and the sights and the trigger pack, etc. And that has been able to slide through. So just to be clear here, if I buy an entire kit and have it delivered to me, that's bad. Correct. But if I buy the pieces separately, like a jig today and the 80% kit tomorrow and then the mills the next day, that's perfectly fine and kosher. Correct. Yes, an 80% lower is still an 80% lower. You could buy a unfinished Glock lower or an unfinished AR lower or whatever your heart may tell. An unfinished Mosin Nagant lower.
I mean, I hate to give Giffords anything. I can understand, though, why they're upset, because this law basically did nothing. Of course, as a gun owner, I'm going, yay, this law basically did nothing. Hurrah.
Yep, and I totally get with that. And number one, I enjoy their salty tears. And two, I will point out the fact that, hey, they're the ones wanting to do these little end run dirty pool games. It's not like they submitted a law that said that you cannot have an 80% lower, defined what percentage you needed to have so that it was more difficult to build guns at home, or even illegal to build a gun at home. Make it so these are the same people who have submitted bills that say that a firearm can only be transferred by a federal firearms license holder. And so if I wanted to buy or sell a firearm with my neighbor, we would have to go to a gun shop to do that legally. Why wouldn't they say, hey, only FFLs can make guns as well? But they didn't do that because they know that they don't have the support in Congress. Even right now, where there is a Democrat majority, it's still not enough to get through. So instead, they go and lobby the group that plays dirty pool, that will say one day a gun is legal and the next day the gun isn't legal, and nothing has changed. And
so they basically played dirty pool with Giffords. Wah wah.
That's right, and they got what they deserved. So therefore, yes, I can understand why they're pissed, and they also deserve it.
Pivoting from bad optics to good optics, David is beginning a series about optics. Okay, pivot done. Now to the real introduction, which I wanted to do. David is beginning a segment on optics, and I would like to state that primitive optics are very much like the pirate's code.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In this, the first of a series of segments, I'd like to discuss the history and use of sights and optics on firearms. Think of these installments as companions to the recent ones by Egghead on night vision. In the beginning, there were no gun sights. There was merely pointing and hoping. As technology matured and new concepts were developed, sights started to appear. At first, they were similar to shotgun sights, a bump on the muzzle and maybe a groove on the receiver. More of a guide to make sure the shot went in the right general direction than an actual sight for accurate shooting. As rifled arms were introduced and became more common, better sights were needed. Some of the earlier styles of iron sights are still with us. For example, the Partridge sight, no, not partridge like the bird, was named after 19th century target shooter and inventor E. Partridge and consists of a square post front sight and a rectangular notch rear sight. Nearly every iron-sighted pistol and many rifles still use this design. The buckhorn and semi-buckhorn sights are named for the curved elements on the rear sight that extend up and around, containing the view of the front sight. The arms of the buckhorn come close to meeting at the top, while the semi-buckhorn is more open. While the former version of this sight has fallen from common use, the latter style is still frequently found on modern production lever-action rifles. Less commonly seen are express sights as used on large-caliber big-game rifles. These sights generally have a wide, shallow V-notch style rear sight, often with multiple flip-up sight blades calibrated for different distances. For anyone who's ever attended a cowboy action match with a long-range component, they've probably seen shooters using a tang-mounted aperture sight, sometimes called a vernier sight. This is the same style that Matthew Quigley used in the movie Quigley Down Under. This sighting system is made up of one of a variety of front sights. They're usually inside a protective tube or hood, and frequently combined with a spirit level for consistent leveling of the rifle. This sight is mounted at the traditional location, the muzzle end of the barrel. The rear sight is on an extension at the wrist of the stock and can be removed or folded down when not in use. By positioning the rear sight on the wrist of the stock, it gave a much longer sight radius than the usual rear sight location near the chamber of the barrel. The tang sight itself was a precision mechanism. It was one of the earliest finely adjustable rifle sights available. Receiver sights were mounted to, as the name implies, the side and top of the rifle's receiver. These sights, also commonly called peep sights, allowed hunters to make accurate snapshots relatively quickly, even in low-light conditions. As with the tang sights, many receiver sights were also capable of precise adjustments. This style of sight is the conceptual predecessor of our modern ghost ring sight. Next came optical sights. At first, these were delicate and imprecise. The earlier ones were very long brass tubes containing only a few lenses. This technology improved during the American Civil War, then more rapidly during and following World War I. These early scopes were externally adjusted, meaning the scope body was solid and the adjustment knobs were located on the scope mounts. Turning these knobs physically changed the angle of the scope. During the First World War, scopes started to be offered with what we now call a BDC, or bullet drop compensator turret. This mechanism allowed for quick adjustment of the scope for different ranges. These are still used on modern precision scopes as either the classic turret style or by markings below the crosshair on the reticle. Following this development were internally adjustable crosshairs utilizing turrets or target knobs on the body of the scope. Adjustments are made in quarter or half minute of angle increments. A minute of angle, or MOA, is, as the name implies, a measurement of angle, not distance. It's designed as 1/60th of a degree. This equates to approximately 1 inch per 100 yards, actually 1.047 inches, and increases with distance. Therefore, 8 inches at 800 yards is still 1 minute of angle. As scope technology continued to develop, a change would be made at the objective lens. This is the lens furthest from the shooter. Traditionally, the objective was the same diameter as the scope tube. This allowed only a limited amount of light to enter the scope. As improvements were made, the objective lens got bigger, allowing for a brighter, clearer image and a wider field of view. Another major improvement in scopes was the ability to adjust magnification. This is usually accomplished by a rotating collar near the ocular lens or eyepiece. This is the lens closest to the shooter. Moving this collar adjusts one of the internal lenses, allowing for greater or lesser amounts of zoom. While there were additional advances in scope design following World War II, other than glass quality, coatings, and general precision, the basic magnified rifle or pistol scope hasn't significantly changed much since that time. Electronic sights of various types have been experimented with for decades. The first generation of night vision optics were developed towards the end of World War II. While crude, bulky, and limited by today's standards, they initiated a drive for further development. Listen to the Egghead's recent segments for a deep dive into that technology. I'll get into electronic sights in more detail in a future segment.
My God! My God, I can see! I can see! Oh, no! Son of a bitch! Now I'm deaf! I can hear again, and I can see. I can hear again, and I can see. But who am I?
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Erin or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm also a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brenna Bock. That's BRENABOCK. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
Yeah, it's important to remember that the first guns didn't have any sights. And you just pointed in the general direction. And anybody's ever tried to do accurate shotgun shooting with slugs only and a shotgun that only has bead sights, they know how difficult that is. Oh, it's frustrating.
It's more of a guideline, really.
Yes. Now I get the pirate joke.
Okay.
But the big thing that I learned, patridge sights, and it was not after hunting. I just assumed, since so much gun jargon is hunting related, you know, bird shot, bug shot, going loaded for bear, and New England and Europe is full of partridges. So I assumed that they were partridge sights and it had something to do with hunting partridges.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, if I was trying to do a wacky New England accent, I would totally pronounce partridge as patridge. Well, yeah, I'm going to go out in the woods and shoot me some partridges.
And that's actually exactly how my grandmother, who was born in Quebec, that is exactly how she would say. She would always say patridge. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me. Oh, other thing I learned, I did not know that there was a full buckhorn and a what did he say, semi buckhorn? I forget what what it was. I've only seen the ones where the horns are wide open at the side, and it's still a good sight to use. I've enjoyed everyone I've shot, but the full buckhorn sight seems like way nicer because it's nice and tight, and so it allows you a little bit better sight resolution and the upper sight is always used for longer range, and so you would want to be able to make much more fine adjustments there than the more close range shots. So there, I learned a bunch of things, and you would think, as nerdy as I am, that wasn't going to happen. Speaking of nerdy, all that talk on vision and optics, it's a good transition for Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns on his latest segment on VR covering tracking and image production.
Hey, this is Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns with another virtual segment for you. This week, I think we should probably discuss how these VR systems currently are working to understand how that affects your gameplay. So, let's start out with PlayStation VR. That was kind of one of the biggest ones to make it big relatively quickly. The PSVR worked by having two different things. Now, you could go with a PSVR and play without having a full setup. So, you really just need a headset and the PlayStation, and you could get going and start out your VR. But that tracked by using lights on the front and on the rear of the headset, and a camera on top of your TV. So the camera was tracking the movement of your head. It's kind of like how the Wii Remote worked, where the Wii Remote actually has a camera in the end of every remote, and you had two IR emitters set up by your TV. That's how the Wii Remote worked. This is kind of the reverse of that, where you have a camera tracking your head. So it kind of sort of tracks, and all PS4 controllers actually have a light on the front of it. So that kind of allows tracking of your hands, considering both hands are on that. There were the PlayStation Move controllers, which basically were two controllers with light up balls on the end, and they'd light up different colors, and that's how it did the hand tracking. It worked. It wasn't the greatest, and games that were set up for the PSVR, you can kind of tell. The original Oculus Rift, that did tracking with one or two cameras. I think you could add up to 3 little camera stations to track the headset and the controllers that come with your hands. Okay. The Valve Index and the HTC Vive use what are called base stations. So you would set up at least 2 of these, if not up to 4, in the corners of your room. And what they do is they are set location and they broadcast an IR signal. And on the HTC Vive, it kind of has an insect-like look on the front. And the way that works is those are IR receivers, and those take the inputs coming from the base stations in order to track where your head is at. Same thing on the controllers. The controllers have rings that have little cameras to detect where the IR is coming from. That way you can do tracking. And it's very accurate. Now, the base stations aren't cheap. The current cost of a base station for the HTC Vive or Valve Index is going for $150 if you can get them. It has been really hard over the last couple of years to actually get them. So, not the greatest option, but you can do up to 4 of them in order to really give yourself a large play area of about 30 feet. Now, that'd be 30 feet square. The problem is, the Index is a wired headset and only comes with about a 16-foot cable. Now, when you're talking stuff like the Oculus Quest, the play space is almost unlimited. That's kind of what it says and feels, but in reality, it's really not unlimited, but it is humongous because you can go into any area. It has 4 cameras around the edge of the headset that track, and it recognizes the room around you. So you can create an actual Guardian area to say, hey, this is my play area, and it tracks the room around you based on that, and it also uses that and IR in the rings on the controllers to track those. That way it gives you full tracking. That's kind of more referred to as like inside-out tracking almost. PS5 The VR, so actually it's PSVR 2 for the PlayStation 5, works on the same method of cameras in the headset tracking. The Valve Desmond is trying to do the same thing. And a lot of the rumors are putting most new headsets are starting to include cameras inside the headset to actually track on your eyes. Because trying to render in VR, it's really difficult because it's where are you looking? And when you're realizing that you have to render for each eye, you're talking incredible amounts of processing power that can bring just about any main computer, even stupid, powerful, super expensive computers can be brought to their knees trying to render VR. Because how far do you make the draw distance? What do you look at? And when you realize that everything has to be rendered and your field of view means you're actually rendering more than the field of view you normally get on most monitors. You're increasing the pixels, you're increasing the density. Really depends on the headset on how high resolution it is, but the lower resolution you have, you're getting a screen door effect. It's way more noticeable on stuff like the original HTC Vive or the Valve Index. The resolution just isn't there, so you can kind of see the pixels. The Quest 2 is kind of right above the line where you really can't see individual pixels anymore. It's kind of right on the line. But that is a thing you have to come up with. And remember, you're wanting to render somewhere between 90 and 120 frames per second per eye. So you're talking 180 to 240 pictures per second. That pushes most graphics cards to their limits. It's beautiful and I love the future, but it does make things really difficult, but it also makes it really cool because you can live in another world. So next time we'll be talking about how these games are rendered and what kind of devices you can play them on and ways of getting them to the device. Because it's all cool to have something that can track the world, but if you don't have a game world to go into, what's the point? You're just putting a screen on your face. It's the screen and the tracking that transport you to another realm. And of course, if you have any questions, why don't you leave them on the show's Facebook page or write into the show and Weer'd will pass them along.
I'm poor. I got nothing to say.
Yeah, he definitely got me on the, this was, he gets me a little bit more exciting on the, that's really fun and all that. And then talks about all the power that you need to run both screens, rendering information to your eyes. And I've got to imagine, given how close they are and essentially you're just enveloped in the screen, is you're not sitting back across your desk looking at a monitor or sitting across the room at a television, that bad resolution of an image or muddy graphics probably make things a whole lot worse when you're in VR. So hence the reason why you need, if you listen to Geeks Gadgets and Guns, you've heard him talk about like how much heat and power his computers throw off with their just like crazy graphics cards.
So does he have to like water cool his gaming rigs?
Yeah, a lot of them are water cooled.
There's some sort of a joke there, but I can't really make the effort.
Wet ass graphics card.
That's actually much better than what I was thinking. We'll go with that. So in part 3 of Weer'd's brutal unlubed fisking of the Brady Campaign, I don't really know where he's going to go after this, because at this point he's having to clean up to his elbow. Any more than that, he's going to turn him into a Muppet.
So here comes part 3 of my fisks series on the Brady Campaign's attempt to refute pro-Second Amendment argument.
Statement number 4. Guns are overall better for the U.S. More guns equal less crime.
Oh, hell yeah! Dr. John Lott wrote a book with this very title. And in fact, it was based on the study that propelled him from an economics professor to a full-time Second Amendment activist. I put a link to his book in the show notes. Go read it! Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them. Just kidding. Let's hear what Brady has.
I'm Josh Scharf, Senior Counsel, Director of Programs at Brady, and I lead our Combating Crime Guns initiative.
As I mentioned in the last Fisk, The Combating Crime Guns initiative is just Brady's little campaign to shut down gun shops in large population centers. Go back to last week to check those show notes. I will take 1 second to note that the very political lobbying group that created and named the Brady background check and is constantly speaking out for universal background check laws, which make it illegal to buy or sell a gun outside of a gun shop, have a lobbying arm for shutting down gun shops who have done nothing wrong. Think about that. They want to make sure you can only buy or sell a gun inside a gun shop. And they also want to shut down the gun shops.
To be honest, I don't get that question a lot. And I talk to a lot of people in law enforcement, policymakers, folks that live and work in impacted communities.
Really? Do you not talk to a lot of people you haven't already vetted to be friendly to anti-gun groups like Brady in Everytown?
And I don't get that question a lot because I think intuitively most people know that more guns does not equal less crime.
Now this I have to give him credit for. As most of you probably already know, I grew up anti-gun, and I remember being overjoyed in 1994 when Congress passed the federal assault weapons ban. And when I was a proponent for more gun control, my number one rationalization for banning and restricting guns was the logical premise that bad people hurt people. Guns are tools that are good at hurting people, so if we can keep guns away from bad people, we'll have less people getting hurt. You'll note that I'm not anti-gun anymore, so clearly I no longer believe that.
And when I do get that question, it's often coming from somebody who has a preconceived notion about the roles of guns in society.
Or maybe they don't have the notion that gun control is always good and a panacea for all of society's ills.
How I do answer that question is first to say, look, the overwhelming science and literature out there on this topic does not support the notion that more guns equals less crime. In fact, most of the literature says the exact opposite.
Check my show notes. The first link is to the Brady Campaign podcast where I cut this audio. You can click on my show notes to look at their website and see that they have no show notes at all. And that's for all 12 of these talking points, not just this one. I can only speculate what studies support this, but I will know that there were so many junk studies coming out of the CDC in the 1990s that Congress had to pass a law that said the CDC funding could not be used to produce anti-gun propaganda. And it was not a ban on gun studies in general, just overly partisan anti-scientific ones. Further, Michael Bloomberg owns his own research school. Yep, there is the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which focuses in part on research on gun control. This group is so even-handed, Bloomberg bought out the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, which was founded as the National Coalition to Ban Handguns, and appropriated its key leadership to head up the gun control division of the Bloomberg School. Yep, the gun control research at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is being headed up by the staff of the psycho ex-girlfriend of gun control, led by the Oompa Loompa of gun control himself, Josh Horowitz. Check the show notes for the CSGV video where that name came from.
But if you're not persuaded by the science and the credible literature out there on this topic, I say use your common sense. There are more guns in civilian hands in this country than there are people in this country. And if more guns equaled less crime, we would have one of the lowest crime rates in the world.
Science and credible literature you made no effort to present or quote. Okay, so time for me to talk about what's in my show notes. So I mentioned that it does make logical sense, since criminals can use guns to commit violence. Less guns would mean less violence. Anti-gunners always point out how high the U.S. crime rate is compared to other countries. Except when they do, those other countries come with a litany of caveats, such as high income, not at war, developed nations. And even then, they leave out a bunch of countries. Why? Because countries like Russia are in the G8 nations, and until recently were not at war. And countries like Brazil, Mexico, and South Africa are rapidly developing. And of course, these countries have gun laws more strict than the U.S. and more violent crime. And of course, when you simply control for economic development, you automatically get a tremendous amount of public safety. So yes, America is the most heavily armed nation in the world. and in fact, one of the safest nations in the world. Further, even in the U.S., some states with the loosest gun laws and the highest gun ownership rates are some of the safest. Yes, the United States isn't the safest nation in the world, but some of the least safe nations in the world have insanely strict gun laws, including the high-income developed nation of Russia, which has extremely strict gun laws and is listed as the number 4 most dangerous country in the world for violent crime. Honest common sense dictates that there are factors that make places more or less dangerous, but gun ownership and gun laws are not the relevant factor.
And beyond that question of just crime and guns is also the issue about the lethality and violent crime. You know, when guns are introduced to crimes, there are more injuries and more death just because of the lethality of guns themselves.
Hey, have a look at the statistics below. There's a lot of places with high murder rates, but relatively low gun death rates. Hell, the Rwanda genocide was carried out almost entirely without guns. The idea that guns drive homicide rate is simply untrue and unfounded.
So looking at violent crime as a measure is also particularly important, and crime that leads to significant injury and death, because we know that when guns are introduced into the equation, that those numbers go up.
Except they didn't. Look at any state or country who enacted tighter gun control laws, and look where their violent crime numbers went. Same goes for reducing restrictions, which is much rarer on the global stage. You can see the same relationship on a smaller scale in the U.S. At best, violent crime rates stay the same when gun control laws are implemented. And when gun control laws are repealed, at worst, the violent crime stays the same. So while Dr. Lott may have been a bit forward saying more guns equals less crime, the converse of the statement, less guns, less crime, is patently false. Okay, for real this time, those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them. So Erin, you've liked the other two so far. How am I doing?
I liked this one better than your second one, but not as good as your first.
I mean, the first one was pretty good.
Yes, it was. I mean, so I liked your first one so much, I wanted to get the notes from it. I wanted to get your script so that I could add it to my Google Doc, basically answers to anti-gunners. So I would have a cheat sheet. And then when I asked for it, you said, oh, I've deleted it. So what I did, I downloaded the episode, I cut out your segment, and I actually ran it through an online transcription service just so I could have the transcript of it.
Well, that's awesome.
That's how much I like it.
How well did it come out?
It came out very, very well. So I use something called Sonix, sonix.ai, and you get a certain amount for free, and then you have to pay. And I use it frequently to transcribe some of the speeches I give when I'm extemporaneous. And Sonix was very, very complimentary as to your audio quality. And I don't remember exactly, but it was basically, this audio quality is phenomenal. We expect, over a 90% accuracy rate. And the things that they got wrong were very minor. Like, you would pause and they would put a period there instead of a comma, or vice versa. Or you would say the word TOO and they would use TWO. Or things like that, but it was very easy to correct that. So, consider that a recommendation from me. If you folks need online recommendations or online transcript services, I recommend Sonix.ai.
Because I will note that there are some days when I'm trying to use the Google Voice. Voice dictation to send text messages while I'm driving, and there are some days where it just cannot make heads or tails of my main accent, and I don't have a particularly thick main accent in my normal speaking voice, so that's good to know. And as far as the audio quality goes, you were asking me for for a recording that you were thinking about making on the steps that I do to clean the audio, and you said, "Wait, you have to do that, and you have to do that every time." I'm like, "Yeah, I do that every time." Oh hell no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I want to press a button, 1, 2, 3, and it's clean. It's like, no, I have to take a sample and I have to isolate, and it's just, no, not worth it. Not worth it.
You get used to it, and oh, it feels so good in the old ear holes.
Yeah, well, you can get used to a butt plug, too. Doesn't mean I want one shoved up there, either.
Yes, and... And you know whose ear holes feel the best, Erin? Our listeners, because they're listening to this podcast, and their ear holes are going, "Oh, this podcast is so good. It's like listening to Silk and Velvet and, I don't know, tapioca pudding." It got weird. Oh, that's
a Silk and Velvet and tapioca butt plug up the listeners' ear holes. Okay.
I'm going to have to transcribe that. That'll be the title of the show. It won't.
I'm not kink shaming. I'm just kink asking why.
If I understood, I wouldn't be like this. Oh, but thank you to each and every one of our listeners. We don't kink shame you for listening. And a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. You guys help keep the lights on. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. And you're not just doing us a favor, you're getting stuff. You're getting lots and lots of freebies, because we got lots of bonuses, such as you get an early release of the podcast, you get the blooper reels, you get the ACP film tracks. Oh, you
get a Silk plug in your ear hole.
You get a butt plug in your ear hole. By the way, got lots of spooky movies, and there's going to be a few more spooky movies, even though this is now after Halloween.
You know, if Christmas can infringe on us, then Halloween can extend. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Plus, actually, I think it might be the next one, or I forget which order it's coming up in, but Rocky Horror Picture Show is coming up.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do that something Blood Fart Lake.
Oh, well, that's... we're probably gonna end up watching that as well. It looks so good. It is a movie with budgets of tens of dollars. And then of course also the ACP Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts. Weird, are we anywhere other than Apple Podcasts?
I mean, yeah, we're in a bunch of places. We're not on Spotify anymore. I don't know why. If anybody knows why I'm not, like, did they change something? I put us on Spotify. We were on there for a little bit, and then we were off. I don't know if they discovered one of the blooper reels that's on Spotify and got mad at us, or if they changed their agreement, if Spotify and Libsyn changed their agreement. But we're on a bunch of other stuff. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on a bunch of like different things. Actually, the guys from the Mind Killer podcast listed off the places that they that they listen to the ACP on, and it's one of those like I haven't heard any of those. So yeah, it's on all the podcast things.
Yeah. Okay. So rate us on all the podcast things.
Yeah, I don't know if you can rate us on the Google Podcasts, but either way, rate us where you can.
Yep. And subscribe to us on the platform. Subscribe to us on all the platforms. Rate us on all the platforms and subscribe to all the platforms. All the platforms. And share the show with all your friends, both online and off.
I have a blog. It's weirdworld.com. I'm also on another podcast. It's called Handgun Radio or something.
and you can get more from me at linktree/Erin Paulette. And this is just for you, Weird. linktree.ee/Erin Paulette. All one word.
I laugh every time. And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I've got a thing for you. I don't have a thing for me. I don't know what to say about me. Whatever. Yeah, I've got something to say for him, but I can't think of what to say for me. And so the content for us is assorted, and so is our podcast. It's lame. I don't care. Good night, everybody.
Good night.